welcome back to the Ask the Unfaithful podcast. I'm joined by my friend, as always, James Anir. How are you, buddy?
Doing great, Sam. Good to see you.
As we launch out today, we're going to jump right into it. Today's question is, and I know that if you are listening and watching and you're a betrayed, there's going to be some metrics here that you're going to want to pay attention to. If you are an unfaithful, you're going to want to even more pay attention to the metrics that James and I discuss, because this could be a bit of a litmus test that you can hold up at your life, you can hold up at your recovery work or lack thereof, and see where you fall and see where you sit. If you are a betrayed, you can maybe even share this podcast with your unfaithful partner and go, look, these are some of the things I've been trying to get you to hear. Maybe you won't hear them from me, but trust these guys. They've been where you are at, if not worse. And you can probably take their opinions to heart because they're speaking to what I'm wrestling with. So today's question is, what does it mean for the unfaithful to be all in recovery work? I'll let you start.
All right. Well, so being all in really means being dedicated to, it's kind of like, I like to look at it as, hey, if I want to learn a foreign language, what's the best way to do that? Is it Rosetta? Is it, taking classes at the local community college? Is it going to that country and going and just staying around that country and getting the immersion,
Right.
And my experience is with language is immersion. My experience with recovery is total immersion. So that's the way that we learn best. The other way that we learn is repetition, right? That's just human beings learn through repetition. That's why school is structured the way it's structured and such. There are very few people who can hear something once and they got it. Right.
Right.
And besides the fact that it's not just always ABC 1, 2, 3. Right? There's so much depth to things that gaining understanding takes that repetition. I reread books, even fiction. And well, for one thing, at 55, I tend to be able to read something I read 20 years ago, and it's like I've never read it.
Right.
But also I tend to learn or see things in a different perspective, right? And so as somebody progresses through their recovery, they're going to see things in different perspectives. It's why if you're a step person, doing the steps again really is revelatory, because it's not just, okay, well, one and done, I'm done with that, because they're a living work, right? So it's great. You can, and not to mention that it's a brilliant structure, which brings me to the next part. You need structure. Everything about acting out tends to be pretty chaotic. There's so much to manage, so many lies to manage, and so on, that it's very, very chaotic. And trying to manage emotions in that time is extremely chaotic. That we're talking for the person who's acting out, for the actor, the unfaithful. And so getting into recovery really benefits from having a good, strong structure. And that helps you really be able to test it against, okay, did I do those things today? Right.
Yeah, because I have to believe there's so many people that think I'm just going to wing it. I tried to wing it. I think we all try to wing it at the beginning because we think we can, because whether we're an addict or not, we're typically winging it in life anyway. And here's the betrayed sitting back going, oh, no, 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 no. We're not winging anything. There's programs, there's books, there's countless authors, intensives, which you and Sharon do, coaches. We have this, I would say, just this audacity to think that winging it is going to be enough when we have just devastated possibly every significant relationship in our life through our acting out, and we're going to wing it. So when you say structure, talk a little bit more. What does that look like? What does that mean?
So for me, I chose 12-step because I knew that I had an addiction. It was beyond a compulsion. It was beyond um, problematic sexual behavior, although that's more of an umbrella term that captures everything, right? But it was no small thing. It was massive. I even took the SAST, which is a great test because it not just looks at, hey, how involved are you in this, but also at measures that look at how much it's impacting your family and other people around you and other parts of your life. Whereas most of the tests are simply, how often do you do this, and do you engage in this, which are great, they're practical, but I love that sort of much more inclusive kind of thing. Now it's a 20-point test, right? So at 6, you have to start looking at it as, okay, there's probably some problematic stuff here. At 12, 13, you got to start looking at, okay, I really need some, perhaps even treatment, right? I scored a 17.
Oh, yeah.
So, A student, baby. Right? Not that I'm particularly proud of that, right? But it did say,
Right.
whoa, okay, serious problem here.
Yeah.
But I didn't take that test until after I already knew there was a serious problem. So I chose SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and I talked about that in one of our previous Ask the Unfaithfuls and podcasts. And I embraced it very quickly. But what I found out was that the structure of going to meetings, of doing the steps, of having daily talks, meetings in person and over the phone with my sponsor. So other people if you're not in 12-step, then that could be a mentor, right? Somebody who's experienced it and somebody who really knows it. And then I had therapy and group and all kinds of support in that direction. Plus I had several supports. And the beautiful thing about my 12-step experience is all of that was all of the supports were built in, right? There were people
Now,
with lots of experience.
right. Now, for those that are sitting here who might be intimidated by the thought of,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, all of this stuff, would it be safe to say, listen, at some level, if you're serious about getting healthy, if you're serious about staying away from the affair partner or partners, if you're really awake and no longer sleepwalking, would it be safe for the betrayed to just be like, I need to see the want to? And the want to is pretty easy. In sports, you can always see the want to. That's the kid or that's the athlete that maybe comes early, maybe stays late, is doing work outside of just organized practice time. To me, the want to is evident. Are you reading a book? Are you watching podcasts? Are you studying? Are you talking to, like you said, sponsor, mentor, coach? Even if you're afraid of therapy, traditional therapy, are you seeing anybody? To me, when I coach the betrayed, I'll tell them, look, well, how much want to do you see? And when the answer is not very much, that's always a big red flag. Is it not? Addict or not addict?
So if the want to surrounds the I just want this over with, then that
Right.
isn't the want, right?
Let's all toast. Thank you. Thank you, God, for saying that. Exactly.
So it's an obvious commitment. One of the sort of great little rules of thumb is how much time and effort did you put in, but time especially, did you put into acting out, whether that's with an affair partner, whether that's with pornography, whether that's with masturbation or fantasy, etc. How much time did you put in with that? And versus how much time are you putting into getting healthy, right? Into recovery, into behavioral and relational recovery. So, if Usually you see a lot of people who, let's say that you want them to do something daily with their program. So whether it's something is, we have a very, very concrete journal, and we actually have a program called our companioning program, which is also, it used to be called the relational support program, but that was a little bit long. And so daily, that's, there are two, the person we're working with sends 2 emails, and they're prompted emails. So there are four questions, 5 questions in the morning, 4 at night. And it, that keeps them involved daily, because if you start your day in a way that says, okay, this is about recovery, what am I going to do today for my recovery, or what am I going to do for my relationship, and so on, and then you end your day with, this is, and how to make that actionable, and etc. This is how I did that today. Then you're bracketing your entire day with something that gets you on the right track. Now, how do you do that during the day? Of course, people have to work.
Right.
But really, if you use that rule of thumb of, okay, here's the time that I literally put in. Okay.
Yeah. I hear I had a guy say, I'll never forget the day, and another therapist taught me this, but I was talking to a guy and he said, Sam, how long? Like, how long are we going to have to talk about this? And how long are we going to have to do this? And I said, until it doesn't bother you this much. And he laughed, but he was pissed
Oh yeah.
because it's the truth. I mean, so I think a good friend of mine, Michael Webb, says this. A colleague of ours, Amanda Esproni, says this. I've heard Sharon say it in different ways too. Isn't it true to say it takes what it takes?
Yes.
Right?
It really does. And it's very hard for, well, what you gave an example of was, I just want this to be over.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Versus, there's a point at which it transfers to, I'm doing this to save my marriage, or from, excuse me, I'm doing this to save my marriage. I'm doing this to keep people off my back. I'm doing this, to stop spending so much time and money, or losing my job, or getting into legal trouble, or whatever, right? To, I'm doing this to save myself. And when that
Absolutely.
switch occurs, then there's a certain joy, or maybe that's a little strong initially.
Probably a pride. There's a pride. There's a
Pride, yeah,
sense of self love, right?
eagerness, I think, is, I want to learn more. And it might be preceded with, oh man, this is such a pain, I don't want to do that, or I don't want
Yeah,
to go to this, or and then you
absolutely.
go, you know what? It if I don't want to do it, it's the thing I most need to do right now.
Oh Lord, you said that. I mean, that's such a good, nobody wants to admit that, but it's such a good litmus test to go, why do I not want to do this so much? What about a therapy session, a coaching session, a book, an exercise makes me so, why does it make my skin crawl? Because I think every betrayed would echo this thought. Those of you that are watching and listening, you're welcome to leave a comment. But I think every betrayed, when they feel they're unfaithful, begrudgingly do something, it strips it of every ounce of effectiveness or gratitude from them or anything, because it's like, wait a minute, do you remember what you've done? Do you remember how you fed me through the wood chipper of trauma? And now you're going to begrudgingly I don't even want you to do it, right? It doesn't it minister to them, to use a faith term, doesn't it minister to them so much rejection and narcissism and just woundedness?
Yes, so it damages and it re-traumatizes, right? It is not, so when we do things begrudgingly, or when we show it as, when it comes out, so let me put it that way, when it comes
Right.
out as or resentment or anger, or I don't know why I have to keep doing this.
Mm.
Then what that tells the partner is, oh, you just not, you don't care. Now the partner's going to naturally
Checking boxes.
get from you don't care about us, you don't care about me. That's natural, right? And I think the ultimate thing too, though, for the person who is trying to get better, person who has acted out the unfaithful, is that they have to realize that they are doing it to themselves, right?
Mm.
They are disrespecting themselves. They are not committed to their own health. And that is really hard to grab hold of when you're in the grasp of a mood, right?
Mm.
And so that's a big deal. And we can talk about that in another episode, but that's a big deal when we're in the hold of a mood or a resentment, right? Or something dry, or fear, which is a lot of what putting time in on your recovery is. The resistance is very often fear based, and a lot of people are going to want to talk about that. But the point though is when you're in the grips of a mood, it makes it really hard to go and do something that is really good for you and self-care. Because guess what? The shame is a fire at that point, right? Because you are in that, now you're shaming yourself by not doing it, and that higher self, or that integral self. I always struggle with saying it that way. It sounds odd, but living in your own integrity is threatened by, I don't want to do that, and so facing that, realizing the damage it can do to you on that shame level, because the more we feel shame, the closer we are to relapsing, to acting out, to be, not necessarily, at least going down that road. So I have another favorite quote, which is not mine. It's adapted somewhat because I can't remember the exact quote, but from a guy named Mark Frost, who wrote some brilliant books, not the least of which is The List of Seven, which is where I got this. The first step along the road to ruin is easier to avoid than the 1,000 which will surely follow.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
And
that's so true.
it is true. We don't want to do the work because it forces us to have to think about the stuff that we've been running from for so long.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do the work. We don't make the connection. And you didn't say it exactly this way, but you inferred it, is we run from the fact that doing self-care is self-love. Getting help is self-love. Doing this type of thing with a therapist or a coach is self-love, but we don't see it that way. We see it as unfaithful anyway. We see it as punishment. We see it as shame. We see it as failure. So maybe talk to the fact that unfaithfuls, when you go get help, you are loving yourself and you're loving your partner and you're loving your kids. When you go do this deep kind of work, you're not torturing or punishing yourself. You're actually showing signs of safety and self-love because you're willing to talk about the stuff that you probably were trying to avoid by your affair or your addiction. You're loving your kids when you are going to confront the trauma that has paralyzed you so you don't pass it down to your kids. Am I right?
Yeah. So it's self-love is probably the hardest part, because most people, whether they know it or not, live in shame, right? Most people, I
Mm.
don't mean most people in general, but most people are acting out, trying to self-soothe, or trying to
Yeah.
self-soothe the emotions that result from the shaming, or the living in shame. So the self-love part is hard, and you know if it needs to be a springboard to get to that place, knowing how much you love your wife or your partner, whether it's wife or husband, or boyfriend, girlfriend, and so on, uh,
Sure.
and how much you love your kids if you have them, right? That doing it for that purpose is certainly a starting place. Not everybody can go right to the, I went right to that, but it wasn't self-love. It was
Mm.
because I knew I was near soul death. right?
Mm,
I was just so close to just losing every bit of respect for myself, every bit of, and I didn't want to ever treat anybody like that again.
right.
So that really sort of was my driver initially. Um, and if you need whatever you need to use to get there, and it needs to turn at some point into self-love, or it will not hold over the long term. And part of that is, you know, you have to open yourself up to giving up your will, which is kind of a 12 step. It is a 12-step saying, but you know, people think that if they feel powerless, you know, if they say I'm powerless, it doesn't mean you're powerless over your entire life, because you guess what,
Right.
just by getting involved in your own recovery, you're making a choice. Every
Yeah.
time you make a choice, and every time that you make the right choice, it does two things: your brain changes, your neurology actually changes, and you can feel proud of yourself. You begin to build self-esteem. You begin, it's an anti-shame. Is that,
So would you say getting help, doing the recovery work, doing just some substantial work
mhm.
actually is not just getting them healthy, but it is rebuilding or maybe even recalibrating or even reclaiming a sense of, for those that come from faith, a godly self esteem, for those that come from an agnostic or atheist or everything in between, just a healthy self esteem to see themselves differently. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is fair. Because right now, you know, or at the beginning, most people look at themselves as monsters. Once they,
Yeah.
you know, or oh my, or pure narcissism. No, pure narcissism is, Sharon, and you discussed that previously. It's personality disorder, but there are narcissistic traits, and they're very strong ones. Um,
Hmm.
or you know, they look at themselves in a very self-shaming way, and so, you know, one of the biggest dangers is to assume that you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
We started off with that, right? And I didn't make this point at the time, and I do want to make it now. And I'll use another 12-step term, but or phrase, and that is, your best thinking got you here,
Right.
right? If you could do it yourself, you would have. And you know, yes, there's a lot of things you do have to do that yourself will be doing, but if you don't have the guidance, if you don't have what you can commonly call a program, so whether whoever helps you structure that program, but you need people who are guiding you, you need people who are supporting you, and people who will those people should be able to challenge you, right? Because you don't want people who are just saying, yeah man, that's really good, you got this.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
And by the way, the death knell for anybody in recovery is those three words: I got this. No.
Right.
The moment you start thinking that is the moment that there's a serious problem in the recovery. Right.
Absolutely.
So, you know, so getting structured, getting immersed, and I can't use that word enough, you know, and think about that time thing: time acting out, time in recovery. Ooh, daily amount of time. Are you doing that? Right.
You
um
had you
Dedication.
had No, absolutely. I think, and you're answering the question before I've asked it, but I know betrayed spouses or partners are out there thinking, what does committed recovery work look like?
Mhm.
And you're just getting into it, structure, dedication. What else would be some markers of a committed recovery?
So it's not going to happen immediately. So progressively, though, what a partner would see is, well, they're going to see the quantitative side. How much time are they putting in? What are they doing? Are they on the phone with a mentor, sponsor, support every day? Are they reading stuff that's going to be helpful? So that's all sort of quantitative and very action oriented. Qualitatively, there are a number of things, and I think we'll do another uh, podcast on this. But just to touch base qualitatively, you're going to see some warmth. You're going to see the real difference. Okay, here's the real difference. And I've got to credit Sharon with this. But what you're going to see is a difference in how you are treated.
Mm.
And there's going to be a thoughtfulness about how the unfaithful's words and actions, they're going to be thinking about how that impacts you,
Yeah.
rather than intent. Right. And that I have to give to Sarah Morales, a wonderful coach who's like the queen of gaslighting in a
Right.
good way. I mean,
But it speaks to exactly right. There's a principle whether you come from faith or you do not, but there should be some fruit. Like if you're meeting with the same, and I say it, and I say it unapologetically. I've talked to people for almost 20 years. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, we're seeing a therapist. We've been seeing the same one for 10 years. And I immediately go, okay, how long has he been acting out, or how long has she been acting out? And I start to say, guys, listen, I just mean no disrespect, but what you're doing is not working. It is time for something new, because God bless them, and nobody's perfect. None of us are perfect. We've both missed it. We'll miss it again. But there comes a point when you have to say, what we're doing is not working, and there should be some fruit to what we are doing. If we're meeting with the same person and still treating our partner the same, something's wrong. If we're reading books, if we're checking boxes, but nothing's changing in the way that we treat our partner and in the way that we treat ourselves, there's a red flag there. And I unapologetically will tell people, guys, I'm sorry, but something's not right here. Am I right in this assessment?
yeah, absolutely. Because there should be, like, progress is going to be, a little bit. So it's going to kind of go like this, right? So here's a plateau, right? That's usually a negative word. It's
Right.
actually, okay, we've come up to this plateau, so we've actually made improvement. And then there's something that happens, whether it doesn't have to be acting out. It can be just sort of the next shift, right? But the
Yeah.
shift involves a drop, and then it involves this difficult time, which a poet named Rilke used to call the dark night of the soul, which Jung also used. And then there's this sort of aha moment. So, and then boom, it's aha, and then there's this, oh wow, this energy to do this work. And then, there's another
Mm.
plateau for a little while, which I'll start over here again. And then there's another drop, but it's unlikely to be as low as the other one, right? So there's this sort of progressive movement. That's what you want to see. It's not going to be linear,
Right.
not like the smooth evolution of your relationship and recovery. And if you look at all the sort of points along the way, it does look very linear. So there has to be
Mm.
some progress in there. If you're stuck or keep dropping steps, right, then there's going to be, that's an indicator very clearly that something isn't working, right? Maybe, and most likely, if you've done a lot of really good work to that point and the things are just getting stale, or they're getting there's a lack of movement forward, and because coupleship can be absolutely I don't even know the limits to it, right?
Right.
And so why is it stuck? And so I
Yeah.
think you're dead on right. What, that has to be looked at, and something has to shift. uh,
Yeah.
and so sometimes that is, I'm big on I'm a coach and a therapist. So some people who you asked about, some people are going to be like, oh, therapy, oh, but going to a coach can be really feel much easier. You're a coach, right? You refer to us if there's something that you're like, oh, this person really
Sure.
needs your bigger therapy part. But I'm also a coach, and Sharon's also a coach. So when people come to us who are like, I don't really want to do this therapy thing, we'll be like, okay, we'll start on the coaching end.
Yeah.
The only thing I do want to say about that is that coaches and therapists both can focus on the relationship. And there is not just this, okay, I'm going to do all the right things to get to not act out again. but there's also the relational part that has to happen concurrently.
Yes. I think as we say goodbye today, I think there's so much here for both sides of the addiction or the affair to grab hold of. How does a couple who's listening and watching as we say goodbye, how does a couple who's sitting here and they're like, James, I don't know where to start. I feel so overwhelmed. I mean, you have people come to you guys all the time in your intensives who you've had to do sometimes so much work just to get them there. Sometimes just getting them there is the biggest goal, because once you get them there, you can do so much great work.
Yeah.
But to the couple that's sitting here, or maybe the unfaithful that's like, guys, like, I get it. I don't even know where to start. What are a couple things that they can do to just immediately gain some traction in their own recovery work?
Can I beat my own drum here a little bit?
Of course,
We
of
have
course.
we have free videos of webinars and interviews that we've done on our website. You can certainly find them here and there, but I think those are really helpful. You know, we've always been this way. We want the best for any person, any couple out there, and we don't have to be the ones who provide that. And we've got resources on our website. There are a lot of great resources out there. You do have to be somewhat cautious because you can overload and overwhelm on that. But
Sure.
there are some things that really help, and most of them can be watched together, right? So doing that because you're watching together. Now that doesn't mean it's not going to. There might be triggers that come up, right? But they are really helpful, and so you know I will say there's a caveat to that, and other than there might be a partner may get triggered, or you know
Sure.
and that is that there's a lot of information out there. There are a lot of podcasts out there, a lot of YouTubes out there, a lot of Facebooks out there, and a lot of helpers out there. Most of it's going to be helpful, and there's only so much that listening to stuff and sort of getting on us that way is going to get you where you need to go, because there needs to be movement, there needs to be action on it. And again, I stress this: don't do it on your own.
Yeah,
Absolutely, with some guidance and instruction and help, then you're doing stuff on your own, but it's with that safety backup.
absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
so that's what I would say to them.
I heard a phrase from a therapist a year or two ago, and I think it speaks volumes. She said this to a group of a small intensive. She said, moving bodies are healing bodies. And so for those of you that are watching or listening, there's something to be said about moving. Get moving. If you're an unfaithful and you're kind of like, Sam, I just feel paralysis, I get it. Go watch any of my videos on YouTube. Go to James and Sharon's website and watch videos. Make a phone call. Talk to somebody who's safe, only safe people. Moving bodies are healing bodies. Get moving, doing something and some forward progress. And then one of the most desired metrics in sports is momentum. When a team has momentum, they can overcome so many odds. But when you don't have any momentum in your recovery, it can feel like reading a couple of pages in a book is exhausting. Trying to go meet or even find a therapist is exhausting. So listen, if you want help, you can reach both James or myself at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. For those of you watching and listening, thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.